Howdy, folks, and welcome to another adventure. And tonight we got a good one for you. It is the destruction of Brookfield. Yes, the destruction of Brookfield. And we're going to start out with King Phillips War. And of course, I got some good presentations to share with you all, of course. And here we go. King Philip's War long continued and extensive negotiations were entered into by Philip with surrounding tribes. At the length on the 24th of June, 1675, the first attack was made at Swansea near Mount Hope, when some 8 or 9 men were killed. The alarm was given into Boston, and a detachment of men sent out under captains Henchman and Pretense. These united with the Plymouth force under Captain Benjamin Church and Major Cutworth. They took up their quarters in a house in Swansea. After some skirmishing, the Mount Hope region was cleared of the Indians. One white was killed, and Mr. Gill struck by a ball that would have proved fatal, but for a singular defensive armor in the shape of a quantity of thick brown paper, which he had inserted under his clothes. The Captain Church mentioned above was a most brave and energetic man, and figures prominently in this war. At the outbreak, he was living as a solitary pioneer colonist in the county of Sagacanotes. Yeah, something like that. It seems that he was in the habit of taking Indians captive, whom he put through a sort of taming process by treating them with kindness and generosity. Yeah. Thus, he soon had about him a devoted bodyguard of soldiers who served him with the greatest enthusiasm. If he saw one of the captives looking surly, he would only clap the man on the back, saying, "Come, come, you look surly," and mutter, "But that signifies nothing. These, my best soldiers, were a little while ago as surly as you are now. By the time you have been one day with me, you will love me too, and be brisk as any of them." And so it proved. On July 18th, the 18th of July, 1675, the United forces of the colonists drove Philip with his warriors into a swamp near Pocast. After some skirmishing with the whites withdrew, it was said that a victorious attack here might have ended the war. Now, let's move on to the destruction of Brookfield. That looks pretty destructive. The story of the destruction of Brookfield by the Nimics, is a thrilling one. The terrified inhabitants of the village had collected in a single house and stood upon its rising knoll of ground. They had fortified their place of refuge as well as they were able by piling logs and hanging feather beds against the walls. The troops under Wheeler and Hutchinson, who had come here for the purpose of the treaty, but had instead been treacherously fired upon, also entered this house, which was then closely besieged by the Indians, who shot burning arrows upon the roof and attaching rags dipped in brimstone to long poles, fired them and thrust them against the walls. From Monday, the 2nd of August, till Wednesday evening, these attempts continued. Finally, they filled a cart with combustible materials and attaching long sets of poles to it so that it could be operated. From a distance, they sent it forward, blazing against the building. But a timely shower of rain extinguished the flames and saved the besieging whites. Assistance reached them that night, Major Willard, with 46 men, affected and entranced into the house, and the Indians retired after their destruction of a large part of the town. As you can see by the map, it seems like they were getting massacred all the way through till Brookfield. And there's a Hopewell Swamp. Okay. In this war, the Nagasets, the old friends of the English, had remained neutral, or at least pretended to do so, but on what seems to us as this distance insufficient grounds, and the colonists resolved to wage war against them, it being alleged that they had aided and abetted the enemy. Accordingly, a very large body of English, under the command of Jose Winslow, governor of the colony of Plymouth, Church also taking part, moved down upon the Nagasets in the middle of the winter. A guide was found who piloted them to the chief fort of the enemy, which was situated on an island in the midst of a large swamp. The entire village was surrounded by a strong palisade, and the only means of approach was by crossing a marsh upon an immense fallen tree. File after file of soldiers were swept from the narrow bridge by the fire of the Indians. At last an entrance was effected. Church, who had been wounded, tried to dissuade the general from firing the wigwams, since on such a bitterly cold night they would need their shelter and warmth themselves. The nearest refuge from the snowstorm, which was impending, being some 16 miles distant. But his advice was unheeded, and a terrible scene ensued. Oh, yeah. Large numbers of old men, women, and children were burned alive in their huts. The chronicler of the scene says the Indians were about preparing their dinner when our sudden and unexpected assault put them beside that work, making their cooking room too hot for them at the time, and when they and their Mitchum fried together, probably some sort of them ate their suppers in a colder place that night, most of their provisions as well as their huts being then consumed by the fire. Those who were left alive were forced to hide themselves in a cedar swamp, where they had nothing to defend them from the cold but broths of spruce and pines. The colonists lost 80 killed and 150 wounded, besides the unnumbered wretches who perished in the huts by the flames. It was supposed that about 500 warriors were killed and 700 wounded. Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. That is the story of the Destruction of Brookfield. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. That was a short one, but it was good. If you want to know more about this, get a history book. Start studying it up. Look it up on the internet. Really interesting stuff. It's amazing what our settling pioneers went through. The ravages of building a house in the middle of nowhere, where the Indians would come and burn it down. You try to sign a treaty, and the next thing you know, they were, you were conducting a fight that you might not be able to win. Your scalp might be hanging in their abode, or something like that. Anyway, hope to join you next time or soon enough. Catch you then. Go have a great